I don't believe in ghosts. I've always considered myself too rational, too grounded in reality for such nonsense. That's what makes what I'm about to tell you so difficult, because now I'm no longer certain what reality is. It began with the radio. I found it while clearing out my late uncle's attic, an antique shortwave receiver, its wooden case worn smooth by decades of handling. Uncle Marcus had been a collector of odd things, a recluse whose funeral I'd attended out of familial obligation rather than any genuine sense of loss. We'd never been close. The few childhood memories I had of him were tainted by his peculiar intensity, the way his eyes would dart to empty corners of rooms, as if tracking invisible movements. The radio seemed harmless enough. Vintage, possibly valuable. I brought it home to my apartment, thinking I might clean it up and sell it online. That first night, I placed it on my bedside table, admiring its craftsmanship despite the layer of dust. The power cord was frayed in places, but intact. On impulse, I plugged it in, not really expecting it to work. The dial illuminated with a soft amber glow. I turned the tuning knob, hearing only the expected static as I moved between frequencies. Nothing unusual, until I reached a point near the end of the dial. The static changed, organized itself somehow. I leaned closer, straining to hear. There were voices in the white noise, distant, distorted, but unmistakably human. I adjusted the tuning carefully, trying to bring them into focus. For just a moment, I thought I heard my name among the indecipherable whispers. Then the radio went silent. I dreamed of tunnels that night, endless passageways with curved walls like the inside of a throat, lit by flickering bulbs that cast more shadows than light. I was looking for something, though I didn't know what. Around every bend, I thought I could hear footsteps retreating, always just out of sight. I woke at 3:42 a.m., drenched in sweat. The radio was on. I hadn't left it on. I was certain of that. Static filled my darkened bedroom, but there was a rhythm to it now, almost like breathing. I reached out to switch it off, but hesitated when I heard a voice emerge from the noise. James, my name, spoken in a voice I almost recognized. Can you hear me yet? My hand froze above the power switch. It's getting stronger, the voice said, fading in and out like a distant transmission. The connection. I've been trying for so long. Who is this? I asked, feeling foolish speaking to a radio. Static surged, then resolved slightly. You know who it is, James. You've always known. And I did know. The voice belonged to Uncle Marcus. I yanked the plug from the wall. The next day, I called my mother, casually asking about Uncle Marcus's death. Heart attack, she said. He'd been found in his radio room, slumped over his equipment. The doctor said he'd been dead for nearly 2 days before the neighbor noticed the mail piling up. He was always obsessed with those radios, she said, ever since Vietnam. Said he heard things sometimes, voices no one else could hear. That's why we didn't let him spend much time with you kids growing up. I didn't tell her about the radio in my bedroom, or the voice and the static. After hanging up, I examined the radio more closely. Beneath it, I discovered a small compartment I'd overlooked before. Inside was a folded note in my uncle's cramped handwriting. The space between stations is not empty. It's where the signals cross over from the other side. They found me through the waves. Now I can't make them leave. If you're reading this, they found you too. That night, I left the radio unplugged. I even removed the batteries from my smoke detectors, unplugged my microwave, my television, anything that might produce static or white noise. I needed a quiet night to think, to convince myself I was being irrational. At 3:42 a.m., I woke to static. The radio was playing, though it remained unplugged. The amber dial glowed brighter than before, casting long shadows across my walls. We miss you, James. Not just Uncle Marcus's voice now. There were others layered beneath it, around it. We're so close. I stumbled out of bed, backing away from the device. What do you want? To finish what Marcus started. He built a bridge, but he was too afraid to cross. You're not afraid, are you, James? The static pulsed, and with each surge, the shadows in my room grew longer, reaching toward me. This isn't real, I said, pressing my back against the far wall. This is some kind of elaborate prank. or I'm having a psychotic break. Reality is just a frequency, James. We found a way to change the tuning. The shadows detached themselves from the walls. I don't remember running from my apartment. I came to awareness in my car, driving along an empty highway at dawn, the radio in the passenger seat beside me. I'd apparently grabbed it before fleeing. My phone showed 17 missed calls from my boss. I'd missed 2 days of work with no explanation. 2 days. I'd lost time somewhere. I pulled into a rest stop, trying to collect my thoughts. When I checked my call history, I found outgoing calls I had no memory of making, all to Uncle Marcus's old number. The radio crackled to life beside me, though I wasn't touching it. "The signal is strongest at the source," said the chorus of voices. "Come home, James. Come to where it began." I should have thrown the radio away. I should have crushed it beneath my tires and driven in the opposite direction. Instead, I found myself heading toward Uncle Marcus's house, as if pulled by an invisible current. The place was exactly as I remembered from the funeral, a dilapidated Victorian on the outskirts of town, paint peeling from its clapboards, surrounded by a thicket of overgrown shrubs. Yellow police tape still crossed the front door from when they'd found his body. I broke in through the back. The house smelled of dust and decay, but beneath that was another odor, ozone, like the air after a lightning strike. I made my way upstairs to his radio room, the antique receiver growing warm in my hands. The room was wall-to-wall with radio equipment, shortwave receivers, amplifiers, oscilloscopes, and other devices I couldn't identify. Cables snaked across the floor, connecting everything in a complex web. At the center stood a massive transmitter, its metal casing oxidized to a dull green. I placed the radio from my apartment into an empty space on the shelf. It fit perfectly, as if that had been its home all along. As soon as it touched the shelf, every piece of equipment in the room hummed to life, dials illuminating, meters jumping. Static filled the air, not from any speaker, but from the space itself, as if the room were a giant receiver tuned between stations. "You brought the final piece," said Uncle Marcus's voice, now clear as if he were standing beside me. "Now we can complete the connection." The walls of the radio room began to ripple like water. Through the static, I could make out faces pressing against some invisible membrane, their features distorted as if viewed through thick glass. Dozens of faces, hundreds, some human, others less so. "What is this?" I whispered. "What did you do, Uncle Marcus?" "I discovered something during the war," his voice replied, seeming to come from the very air around me. "When the bombs fell, they thinned the barriers. I heard them calling through my field radio, voices from the spaces between life and death, between dimensions. I've spent decades building this gateway." The static grew louder, the faces more distinct. "They just want to cross over, James. They're trapped in the static, in the white noise between worlds. I couldn't complete the connection alone. I needed someone of my bloodline. I needed you." The air crackled with electricity. Papers on the desk began to lift and swirl in an unfelt wind. The temperature plummeted so rapidly that frost formed on the windows. "No," I said, backing toward the door. "I won't help you with this." "It's already done," said the chorus of voices. "You made your choice when you brought back the receiver. The final conduit. Your body is the last component we need." My limbs grew heavy, and a pressure built behind my eyes. I could feel something trying to push its way into my mind, crowding out my own thoughts. "Please," I gasped, fighting against the invasion. "I don't want this." "Neither did Marcus," said the voices. "That's why his heart gave out. He resisted at the final moment. We had to find another way. We had to find you." What happened next remains fragmented in my memory. I remember the static becoming physical, surrounding me like a cocoon of television snow. I remember the faces pressing closer, features becoming more defined as they approached our reality. And I remember Uncle Marcus's journal, spotted on the desk among the swirling papers, flipped open to a page with a crude drawing, a circuit diagram for the radio room, with one component circled repeatedly in red ink, the master power junction. With the last of my strength, I lunged for the circuit breaker panel on the wall. The entities realized my intent too late. The screams melded with the static as I threw the main switch. Darkness crashed down. The pressure in my head released like a bursting dam. In the sudden silence, I could hear my own ragged breathing. Then a soft click. A single red emergency light activated in the corner, casting the room in a bloody glow. The equipment remained dead, but the static hadn't completely dissipated. It hung in the air like mist, condensing slowly into a single humanoid shape. Uncle Marcus stood before me, not as the old man I remembered from the funeral, but as the young soldier he'd once been. His eyes were hollow, his skin translucent. "They'll find another way through," he said, his voice barely audible now. "They always do. The barrier is too thin here." "Why did you involve me?" I demanded. "Why not take your secret to the grave?" "I tried," he replied, "but they wouldn't let me rest. They made me reach out to you." He looked down at his fading hands. "I'm sorry, James. I've damned us both." Before I could respond, he dissolved back into static, and then into nothing. I burned the house that night, watching from across the street as flames consumed Uncle Marcus's gateway. The fire department arrived too late to save anything but the foundation. I told the police I'd seen teenagers breaking in. They had no reason to suspect me. I thought it was over. I was wrong. 3 days later, my television turned itself on in the middle of the night, broadcasting only static. The next night, it was my car radio, then my phone, filling my ear with white noise during a call. They're finding their way through other channels now. Weaker connections, but growing stronger. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can see the faces pressing against the membrane of reality, searching for tears, for weak spots. And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I catch a glimpse of Uncle Marcus looking back at me, his hollow eyes wide with warning. I'm writing this as a warning of my own. Be careful of the static between stations. If you hear voices in the white noise, don't listen. Don't respond. They already know your name.